"My lady, I'm planning to take a concubine." When Duanqing said this, I was ironing his court robes for tomorrow's palace visit. Upon hearing this, I nearly knocked over the iron pot filled with hot coals. He crossed his legs and said to himself, "I'm going to bring Miss Zhou into the household, a noble woman from the previous dynasty. You've met her. When I was fighting alongside the emperor to conquer this realm, my head was tucked in my belt. Now that I'm a duke, what is wrong with taking a marquise's legitimate daughter?" Old Han and his family, that muddy-legged oaf who can't even read, married an earl's daughter as his second wife. Looking at the matter-of-fact expression on his face, I took a deep breath. What had to come had finally come. At 38, after spending half my life suffering alongside him, it was time to enjoy some peace and comfort. And so, in my 39th year, I decided to become a merry widow and enjoy the good life. Miss Zhou, a legitimate daughter of the previous dynasty's nobility. At the imperial banquet, Miss Zhou walked past him carrying a wine cup, her eyes glancing at him from the corner, and Duanqing's eyeballs nearly stuck to her. I clenched my fists and looked up at him. He'd been holding back these words for a long time. At court, at imperial banquets, those pedantic old ministers who were lucky enough to be spared always cast sidelong glances at him, mocking his vulgarity. But then they'd turn around, put on fawning smiles, and try to push their daughters on him as concubines. Lady Zhou, legitimate daughter of a marquis household from the previous dynasty, whose ancestors enjoyed wealth and nobility for 5 generations, raised in a nest of luxury and splendor. Even though she has fallen on hard times now, that air of nobility she carries, even as the esteemed wife of a duke, I still feel ashamed of my inferiority. People like Duanqing, I understand them all too well. Someone who crawled up from the mud, suddenly wealthy and noble, fears nothing more than being called uncouth. Marrying a noblewoman is both a symbol of status and the best shortcut to shed the labels of mud-legged and crude military brute. So he wants to bring this noble woman from the previous dynasty through his doors, firstly to show those sour scholars, and secondly, because his urgent desire to enjoy himself has taken over. "My lady." He called me with exaggerated airs, biting down especially hard on the 2 words, "my lady," as if to remind me. He is now a duke of the current dynasty, and I, a wife from humble beginnings with no power or influence, who can only rise through her husband's glory, should know my place. Not a word about how, years ago when he was defeated in battle and fled into the mountains, I walked for a day and a night carrying 2 corn buns to find him. When I found him, he'd already burned up with fever and lost consciousness. I carried him out for 30 li back then. He grabbed my hand and said, "When this old man makes it big, I'll make you a lady with imperial honors." Now, I am a lady with imperial honors. And then what? He stands before me, his spittle spraying onto my face, telling me he is taking a concubine. I folded up the court robes and said softly, "Husband has spent half his life in military campaigns. He should indeed enjoy some peaceful blessings." That Duanqing has thoughts of taking a concubine doesn't surprise me at all. Those old friends who fought alongside him to conquer the world, after achieving success and fame, which one of them didn't take concubines? Last month, I went to the Marquis of Zhenbei's mansion to visit Linlin, a good sister from the old days, not seen for 3 months. She had become so thin she was unrecognizable. Linlin lay alone on the bed, her face waxy yellow, her breath as faint as a thread. She gripped my hand, tears streaming down like rain. Promotion, wealth, and the death of the first wife. This is our fate. Back then, she knelt in the snow, kowtowing until her head bled, to beg for a dose of medicine for her man. Now she lies here, with no one caring about her. Her man is in his concubine's bed, reveling night after night. The devoted wife who suffered all the hardships with him lies in bed, rotting away alone. Faye, that bitch, came in on her first day wearing all red. My man said, "She is just a child who doesn't know better. Why bother with her?" She gripped my hand tightly. Later, she didn't know better every single day. Coming late to pay respects, didn't know better. Eating my bird's nest soup, didn't know better. Contradicting me in front of guests, didn't know better. My man told me to be more tolerant. Faye, she suddenly laughed, tears overflowing from her eyes, sliding down her cheeks and into the pillow. Only then did I notice that the pillow embroidered with gold thread had turned black and yellow all over. That bitch even accused me of causing her miscarriage, but she wasn't even pregnant. But Lu Cheng, That blind fool, without a word of question, slapped me to the ground. Not only did he call me a venomous woman, he confined me to my quarters and stripped me of my authority as the household manager. That tigress from the Dingguo Marquis household across the street, when her man wanted to take a concubine, she hacked the doorframe with a cleaver. The whole city cursed her as a jealous shrew, but her man is in her bed. I, this virtuous wife, have been tortured by this bastard until I'm barely clinging to life. She mustered her strength and gripped my hand tightly. If Duan Qing ever gets such ideas, you must never let those former dynasty bitches through the door. They've fallen into the mud. They'll grab any straw to climb up. They'll use any means. They have no shame. We can't fight them. That speech seemed to drain all her strength. She gasped for quite a while before saying in a voice faint as a thread, "Fortunately, Duan Qing isn't that kind of person. You're blessed." At the time, I only smiled bitterly at her. Among all us original wives, I was indeed relatively blessed. The new emperor ascended the throne and lavishly rewarded his founding ministers. This bunch of boors all had their lewd thoughts stirring. Visiting brothels, drinking with courtesans, taking concubines became the trend. Only Duan Qing remained fairly honest. Leaving the marquise's residence, I stood at the entrance and glanced across the street. The stone lion in front of the Dingguo Marquise's gate still bore the gash that woman had hacked into it with her cleaver. I boarded the palanquin and closed my eyes. Liu Wei married a young lady from a declining official family as his second wife. Zhou Hu took the left chancellor's adopted daughter as a concubine. Old Zhao sent his original wife back to their hometown, then turned around and married a woman from the imperial clan. When they drank, they said, "That old hag taking her out is embarrassing." Linlin said, "Promotion, fortune, and a dead wife. That is our fate." I opened my eyes, looking at the swaying sedan curtain. Lately, the way Duan Qing looks at me has started to change too. Before, he saw a companion who shared hardships. Now he sees an old piece of clothing, not torn. Still wearable, but no longer bright enough. He wants to wear something new. He doesn't realize those noble ladies look at him like a piece of fat meat. He thinks it is what he deserves. Success achieved, time to enjoy it. As for me, just a stone blocking the road. He talks about taking a concubine like he is notifying me to add an extra pair of bowls and chopsticks. As my thoughts raced, a smile was already plastered on my face. "De Lang has worked hard for half a lifetime. You should enjoy yourself now." He froze. I walked closer to him, looking at the newly added wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, my voice trembling. "Joined the army at 17, over 20 years and 100 battles. Made duke and granted noble rank. Forget some marquis family's legitimate daughter. Even an imperial princess would be a fitting match." He opened his mouth. Those words, "You're not allowed to make a fuss," stuck in his throat. And after a long while squeezed out, "Madam, are you saying you agree?" "Why wouldn't I agree?" I smiled gently. "De Lang has achieved success and fame. I'm respected at home. Who do I rely on for that? Isn't it all bought with De Lang's life?" His eyes reddened. The year I married him, he was a broke-down and outer. I was a country girl. When he went to war, one sewed winter clothes. When he was injured, I brewed herbal medicine. My mother-in-law was bedridden for 3 years, and I tended to her shit and piss, without letting him worry for a single day. "My lady," he grasped my hand, his rough palm burning hot. "Rest assured, even if I marry 100 noble ladies, you are the principal wife. No one can surpass you." I withdrew my hand and straightened his collar for him. "As long as you acknowledge my devotion, that is enough." "I do. I absolutely do." "Then I'd also like to ask you for some reassurance." I stepped back. "Our eldest son Chengyi is 19 now, and has trained with you in the military camp for 3 years. I want to request that he be granted the title of heir apparent." He nodded readily. "As it should be. I'll submit the petition tomorrow. There is one more thing." I took out a medicine packet from my sleeve and poured it into the tea. "Please drink this bowl of medicine." He froze. "Sterilization decoction." He violently flung his hand away. "Have you lost your mind? Ladies, the reverse psychology here is top tier. She convinces this arrogant man to drink a sterilization potion to protect his own legacy from his young side piece. He chugs it thinking he is just dodging future inheritance drama. But plot twist, it is actually a slow-acting poison for him. She literally handed him his own exit ticket, while perfectly playing the supportive, protective wife. This isn't just chess. This is city warfare. Take notes. Don't be hasty. I gently stirred the tea and blew on it. Hear me out. He glared at me, veins throbbing on his forehead. Joshi is 18 this year, formerly the legitimate daughter of a marquis household, raised in gold and jade luxury. I looked at him calmly. A person like that, marrying you as a concubine. What is she after? Is it your age, your rough temper? His lips moved. What she is after is your title, your power. I placed the tea in his hands, but the Zhou family miscalculated. Your title as Duan Qing was earned with your life. Who you pass it to is for you to decide. He said nothing. You drink this bowl of medicine, and after the Zhou woman enters the door, if she can't bear children, she won't have any crooked ideas. I looked at him. When she finds out she can't conceive and makes a fuss, you just push it all on me. Say it was me, this jealous wife. You'll be clean. It'll all be my fault. He held the teacup, the tea water gently rippling. But think about it the other way. I lowered my voice. The Zhou woman enters the door. Her first child is a son. Won't she think, why can't my son inherit the title? She, of noble birth, becomes your concubine. Why should her son be beneath Chengji? His Adam's apple moved. When she makes a fuss then, her family joins in. The censors impeach you for favoring a concubine over your wife. The emperor scolds you for not even managing your household affairs properly. I sighed. You've fought wars your whole life. Do you want to spend your old age scheming with women? The wind blew in from outside the window. The candlelight flickered. Our sons, Chunji in martial arts, Chengping in scholarly pursuits, are at critical stages right now. We can't let something like this affect the children's futures. His cloudy eyes cleared up quite a bit. Heaven has been kind to me, giving me 2 intelligent sons. The children are not only my shield, but also one of Duan Qing's few weak spots. He suddenly spoke. I'll drink it. Staring at the foam in the tea water, he closed his eyes and drank it all in one gulp. After drinking, he slammed down the teacup with a bang. You're right, I've fought battles all my life, so why should I, in my old age, still be schemed against by women? They want their grandsons to inherit the title. Dream on. I showed a smile on my face and held his rough hand again. That is right. Our 3 children have also followed you through campaigns east and west, suffering all kinds of hardships. This duke title should naturally be enjoyed by our sons. He nodded and grasped my hand in return, patting it gently. My lady is still the most thoughtful. I will never be like those others who dote on concubines and destroy their wives. Please trust me, my lady. I nodded emphatically, my eyes glistening with moved tears. I've always known that Delang is definitely not an ungrateful person like Lu Cheng. Lu Cheng, that crude man who came from being a bricklayer, how much suffering did Linlin endure following him? After he achieved success and fame, he brought in a concubine who was the daughter of a fallen official. In less than half a year, he tormented Linlin until she was neither human nor ghost. The day after I left the Zending Marquis Manor, news came that Linlin had died of illness, and that ungrateful bastard Lu Cheng turned around and married a noble lady as his wife. He held grand banquets for guests full of pride and ambition. The children of his first wife had not yet emerged from the grief of losing their mother, but were already forced to kneel before the new lady and kowtow. That kind-hearted woman had accompanied the man through half a lifetime of hardship, but in the end, she met such a fate. I suppressed the towering hatred in my heart, watching Duan Qing with tears and a smile. This face, ravaged by wind, frost, blades, and swords for 20 years, was withered, rough, dark, with an ugly scar on the left cheek. His eyes were no longer clear and bright, leaving only turbid desire. The way he looked at me had changed from the focused gaze of the past to casual indifference, often with a flash of disgust. But I still gazed at him tenderly, whispering like a hypnotic suggestion. My Delang has never let me down. After years of marriage, I understood Duan Qing too well. A crude man who crawled up from the bottom, even after becoming a duke. He still loved being praised, but those civil officials in the court, from generations of upright families, had never looked at him properly. Vulgar mudlig was the open contemptuous term the civil official faction used for the nouveau riche nobles, but that didn't stop these self-proclaimed upright remnants of the previous dynasty from sending them concubines and adopted daughters. And these people, while cursing them as sour pedantic scholars, eagerly accepted and enjoyed them. Duan Qing was no exception. The difference was that compared to those filial sons and dutiful grandsons, he at least had some self-awareness and was slightly willing to listen to advice. Seeing the rare tenderness in his eyes, I decided to strike while the iron was hot. When will Lady Zhou enter our household? How about letting her in after Chengji is granted the title of heir apparent? I looked at him with a smile, appearing completely understanding and accommodating. Sometimes I really envy her a bit, enjoying a life of luxury the moment she enters the door. But I accompanied Delang through half a lifetime of hardship before earning today's position. I lowered my eyes, showing him my rough hands, my eyes instantly reddening. These hands had served his bedridden mother, dug him out from a pile of corpses when he was barely alive, tailored clothes for him, bandaged his wounds, washed his dirty laundry, and even held knives and axes. But comparing yourself to others will only drive you mad. Who told me to be born 20 years earlier than her? Duan Qing silently held my hand, and after a long while dropped the line, "I'll go write the petition for your ennoblement right now," and strode away. I watched him leave, my gaze falling on the empty doorway. I recalled when he went off to war. I stood at the village entrance to see him off, and he turned back to look at me every few steps. Back then, his eyes were full of me now. All that remained in his eyes was disgust. He couldn't even bother to hide. He joined the army at 20, fought his way until 40, and finally crawled out from the mud to become someone above others. But in his bones he was still that cowherd boy ordered around by landlords. The moment he got a noble lady, he couldn't wait to latch onto her. This kind of person can only share hardship, not wealth and honor. "Go fetch the account books," I said to my son, who hurried over. "Starting tomorrow, you'll learn to manage the family business." Chengyi was startled. "Mother, father won't agree to this." "He will give it," I interrupted him. "He drank that bowl of medicine, and the bit of guilt in his heart hasn't dissipated yet. Taking advantage of this opportunity, seize control of the family assets. From now on, however many noble ladies he wants to take in, let him do as he pleases. Can't produce children anyway, so there won't be any trouble. Even if trouble arises, there is nothing to fear. If men aren't afraid of being branded as ungrateful and disloyal, why should we women fear the mere infamy of being a jealous wife?" I placed my hand on that court robe embroidered with golden pythons, stroking it inch by inch. The stitches are still the same stitches from back then, but the person is no longer the person from back then. But I am still the same me, 38 years old, body strong and healthy, eldest son dependable, second son excels at studies, little daughter well behaved. From now on, I will live for myself. When Lady Zhou entered the household, my eldest son Chengji had just been conferred the title of Crown Prince. She knelt to offer tea, but her eyes were like knives cutting into me. I held the teacup without accepting it. "It seems concubine Zhou is unconvinced," she started, and tears immediately welled up. "Madam misunderstands. This concubine is overjoyed to be able to serve the Duke." A beauty shedding tears like pear blossoms in the rain. Duan Qing immediately shot me a glare on the spot. I smiled. "Is it because the crown prince was conferred too early that you're unhappy?" Lady Zhou cried even more pitifully, her face full of disbelief. "Madam misunderstands this concubine. Madam's eldest son being conferred crown prince. How could this concubine be unhappy?" She bit her lip, stubbornly holding back tears, as if I were the wicked woman abusing my power to bully others. Duan Qing immediately spoke up. "Madam, quit while you're ahead." I took a deep breath and put on a perfect smile again. "All right, I was just teasing you, Auntie Zhou." I stared at her. "My Lord Duke is 43 this year, and a rough man at that. You're a young lady of 18 in your prime. Why would you be willing to become the Duke's concubine? Do you truly admire my Lord Duke, or are you after the wealth and status of the Duke's manor?" As expected, Lady Zhou naturally answered, "Admiration." I let out a soft sigh and looked at Duan Qing with a smile. Although this guy is a rough man, he does have some self-awareness at least. His previous urgent desire for Lady Zhou seemed to have faded somewhat. Having achieved my goal, I quit while ahead and deliberately rewarded her with a pair of cheap bracelets. Although Duan Qing was wary of Lady Zhou, it didn't stop him from enjoying her thoroughly. And for a rough man like him who had suffered for half his life, this kind of gentle consideration and understanding from a high-born noble lady must be like a bone-scraping steel blade. As expected, Duan Qing quickly fell for it. Not only did he break precedent by accompanying Lady Zhou back to her parents' home, He also gave her whatever she asked for. He even made an exception to let her live in a separate courtyard, assigned her servants and maids, and provided her with a sedan chair for outings. Her extravagance was no less than mine as the Duke's wife. Watching the flowing water of expenses from Lady Joe's courtyard, I remained calm and composed. Not only did I not obstruct it, but I deliberately added much more. After Joe secured her footing, she indeed used this cheap bracelet to make an issue of it. Duanqing, that volcanic filial son, indeed came to me with trouble, questioning me, as the dignified wife of a duke. How could I give a concubine such a cheap bracelet? Aren't I afraid of being laughed at by outsiders? Upon hearing this, I wiped away tears with a sorrowful expression. Delang, have you forgotten this pair of bracelets? Back then when you were a squad leader, you received a reward and specially bought them for me. All these years, I've worn them on my body, never taking them off. To me, this pair of bracelets is more precious than any treasure. Aunt Joe doesn't understand the important meaning this pair of bracelets holds for me, and I understand that. But how could Delang forget? Duanqing's lips moved, and before he could speak, Joe's eyes reddened first. It is this concubine's fault. You and the Duke are husband and wife who have shared hardships together. Naturally, this concubine can never shake that. She lifted her face, looking at Duanqing with tearful eyes. But when the Duke followed His Majesty to conquer the realm, it must have been the darkest of times. Times ordinary people wouldn't want to recall. Why must Madame always bring up matters that sadden the Duke? Duanqing's expression changed. The look in his eyes toward me shifted from guilt to disgust. Joe is right, he said with a stern face. You always bring up things from the past. Isn't it just to make me feel guilty? From now on, don't mention those old matters again. I looked at him. 26 years as husband and wife. We've been through hell and high water together, and now you can't even mention it. I raised my hand and slapped Joe across the face. You dare hit me. Joe covered her face, eyes full of disbelief. Duanqing was also stunned. I sneered. Joe, when your Joe family fell on hard times, I actually felt sorry for you. Only today do I realize that you all deserve exactly what you got. What do you mean, madam? Duanqing frowned. I looked at him. She says those days were dark for you and shouldn't be brought up again. But who was with you during those days? Me. I was the one who charged through mountains of blades with you, who waded through seas of fire with you. Now that you've made it big, those days have become dark times. Painful memories that shouldn't be mentioned. Duanqing's lips moved. Then let me ask you, I pressed closer. What if the Emperor thinks the same way? His face changed. The Emperor rules all under heaven, looking at you old cronies from his days in the hidden residence, illiterate, crude in behavior, constantly bringing up those days when you suffered together. Does the Emperor also find it annoying? Does he also think those were dark years, painful memories that shouldn't be mentioned? While those old ministers from the previous dynasty are cultured and refined, proper in their conduct, never speaking of such things, they accompany the Emperor daily, discussing poetry and painting, speaking gently and softly. Over time, doesn't the Emperor find you crude lot more and more distasteful? Duanqing's face became extremely ugly. Delang. I looked into his eyes. You resent me for bringing up the past because it makes you feel guilty. But have you ever thought that Joe's trying to make you hate the old days isn't because she feels sorry for you? It is because she wants to dig out your roots. What are your roots? They're your merit in following the dragon, your 26 years of braving death. Dig all that out. And what are you? Just a crude, uncouth country bumpkin. When that time comes, who can discuss poetry and painting with His Majesty? The Joe family. Who can make His Majesty happy? The Joe family daughters. And you, Duanqing. I pointed at Joe, who was covering her face. What she hates isn't me. It is you, muddy-legged lot. If you all hadn't followed His Majesty in rebellion, she'd still be the legitimate daughter of a marquise's household, high and mighty. But now she has to kneel and serve you. How could she accept that in her heart? She can't touch your title, so she goes after your mind, making you despise your humble wife, making you forget your roots, making you grow distant from those old brothers. Once you've all become isolated and alone, her Joe family will have made their comeback. Joe suddenly raised her head. You're slandering me. Ife, I'm slandering you. I looked at her. Then swear an oath. Swear there is not a shred of resentment in your heart, that when you served him, you never thought, why should I? Faye, she would naturally refute it, but I wouldn't give her another chance. I slapped her again, a double tap of physical and emotional damage. She completely unpacks the gold digger's motives right in front of the husband. She hits him right in his deepest insecurity. The fact that this noble girl secretly thinks his country roots are absolute trash. She masterfully reframed the mistress from a delicate flower to a political sleeper agent out to ruin him. The manipulation is simply chef's kiss. Joe's entire body flew out, clutching her face, unable to get up for a long while. I knew my own strength well. I was a countrywoman who'd fought through mountains of blades and seas of fire. I had plenty of strength. With this slap of mine, it is enough to make her see stars for quite a while. Joe covered her struck face, blood trickling from the corner of her lips, half her face swollen high, tears streaming down like rain, looking helplessly at Duanqing. My Lord Duke, this concubine is wronged. This concubine is truly wronged. Duanqing looked at her, heartache and scrutiny battling on his face. I shook my numb hand and sneered. Delang, back then when His Majesty was besieged at Wazi Slope, your 300 men fought to the death for 3 days and nights, and 47 survived. His Majesty said he would never forget your kindness for the rest of his life. Duanqing's eyes tensed, and now, I looked at him. Those sour scholars from the previous dynasty accompany His Majesty day after day composing poetry, speaking in soft, gentle words as time goes by. When His Majesty sees you rough men again, won't he also feel that those days were too dark and shouldn't be mentioned again? His expression changed. When the birds are gone, the bough is put away. When the rabbit dies, the dog is cooked. You've heard this saying. I walked toward him step by step. If one day His Majesty also finds you old officials an eyesore and wants to replace you with a batch of refined scholars instead, Dalang, would your heart not turn cold? His Adam's apple bobbed. I pointed at Joe. Put yourself in my shoes. I've suffered alongside you for 26 years. We've been through hell and high water together, and now for the sake of such a thing, you want to dig out my roots and stab my heart. Dalang, how can you bear to do this? He stared at me in a daze after a long while. He suddenly lifted his foot and kicked Joshi to the ground. Get back to your courtyard, without my word. You're not allowed to come out. Joshi lay on the ground, face covered in blood, looking at him in disbelief. That evening, Duanqing brought the storehouse keys, land deeds, and the silks and gold newly bestowed by the emperor before me, one by one. Madam, from now on, all of these are under your management. I nodded and accepted them. Dalang, if you want to take concubines, I'll let you. If you want to indulge, I'll let you. But there is one condition. I looked at him solemnly, my face completely serious. Don't touch my foundation. My foundation was earned through 26 years of hardship. Whoever tries to dig it up, I'll fight them to the death, I said to him. I know I'm old and faded, coarse and vulgar, so naturally I won't compete with the new woman for favor. If you're not afraid of being mocked and scorned by scholars everywhere, feel free to divorce me, your wife from humble times, and marry the noble lady of your dreams. Qing naturally made a bunch of promises, but I understand. As for those hard times, Joshi was right. They shouldn't be mentioned anymore, because I'm just a coarse wife from humble times. Without beauty, without a young and tender body, I'm no longer worthy of reminiscing about past hardships with him. Duanqing had neglected Joshi for a few days, but couldn't resist the longing of his lower body, and in the dead of night, slipped into Joshi's bed again. The next day, when Joshi came to pay her respects to me, there was provocation hidden within her timidity. I paid her no mind and beckoned, summoning 2 women who were even more charming and alluring than her. This is Yang Shi, and this is Huang Shi. Watching Joshi's face slightly change color, satisfaction surged through my chest. They are the same as you, all formerly noble ladies. Now their families have met with great calamity, and they've been ground into the mud. But the Duke has always been kind-hearted and pitied them for being alone and helpless, so he brought them into the manor from now on. You are sisters and must get along well with each other. The identities of Yang Shi and Huang Shi had been embellished by me. The 2 were indeed daughters of official families, but not noble ladies. Yang Shi was the concubine-born daughter of an official family, and because she was female and they really couldn't afford to raise her, she was sent to a brothel. Huang Shi's background was even more illustrious. a woman of the previous dynasty's royal clan who, after the fall of her country and the ruin of her family, could only sink into the world of pleasure. Both had grown up in brothels and learned a whole set of seductive skills. They could sing and dance with a full repertoire of talents. Have them play the prostitute, and they'd instantly become soft and seductive to the bone. Have them play the noble lady, and they'd instantly become dignified and reserved. Looking at these two even more outstanding competitors, Zhou Shi ground her teeth to powder. Naturally, she had no time to challenge me. I began lavishly buying myself jewelry and accessories, tailoring new clothes, and acquiring estates and farmland. The more extravagant, the better. When the century-old shop Baibao Pavilion in the capital released new kingfisher feather headdresses inlaid with precious gems, I bought them without even batting an eye. The maid serving by my side reminded me with a look of shock. "Madam, take it easy. Ever since the 3 concubines entered the household, money's been flowing like water. If you keep spending like this, we'll be drinking the northwest wind next month." My tone was indifferent. "Momo, you're wrong. If I don't spend this silver, there are plenty of people who'll spend it for me." I looked at her seriously. "They've stolen my man, spending the silver that should belong to me and my children, and in the future they might even claim their place in the main hall and take my position, so why should I scrimp and save?" Momo was dumbstruck. She had also suffered through hardships with me all along, and had witnessed the miserable lives of those legitimate wives. Lu Cheng's concubine, Lady Yun, confronted me head-on at the 100 Treasures Pavilion. We both set our eyes on the same red-gold kingfisher feather phoenix hairpin. Who would have thought that Lady Yun, surrounded by attendants, dripping in gold and silver, carrying herself with the airs of a legitimate wife, was just a year ago a pitiful official's daughter, whose male family members were all exiled, whose female relatives became slaves and servants, kowtowing everywhere begging people to take them in. She looked me up and down and said arrogantly, "I'm buying this hairpiece, madam. Please buy something else." What responded to her was my huge solid slap, along with my condescending humiliation. "You, a lowly maid serving as someone's concubine, dare to act wild in front of this madam. You became the Zhongguo Marquise's concubine and schemed the legitimate wife to death, thinking you could rest easy. But in the end, it was all for nothing. This is the karmic retribution for your arrogance." I stared at her flushed pink face, red with anger, and slapped her again. "Feeling pretty comfortable being someone's concubine, huh? You've completely disgraced the dignity of all scholars in the world. No wonder I look down on those so-called civil officials. On the surface, they act all righteous, constantly talking about morality, benevolence, propriety, integrity, and shame. Today they say Lord so-and-so is vulgar. Tomorrow they say Marquis so-and-so is nouveau riche. Yet they turn around and send concubines to these people, even sending their own daughters. Then they instigate their daughters to fight against the legitimate wife, scheme against the legitimate sons. Their ambitions are plain as day." Lady Yun's skills in household scheming were no less than Lady Zhou's, but unfortunately both her paternal and maternal clans were convicted of crimes. Even if she fought the legitimate wife to death, she couldn't be elevated to proper wife status. That bastard Lu Cheng, after reaching the highest position among officials, also started caring about what the civil officials thought of him. He thought marrying a civil official's daughter would wash away his vulgarity and nouveau riche stench. Little did he know, those scholars who are proud to their very bones, their disdain and contempt for military men is both a reasonable suppression and survival wisdom. This Lady Yun really had good luck. The new madam had just entered the front door when she received the punyu of bringing prosperity to her husband from Master Yuantong of Huguo Temple. Lu Cheng, the most superstitious man alive, believed it without question and elevated Lady Yun's status everywhere. Relying on the protective charm of bringing prosperity to her husband, Lady Yun was almost on equal footing with the new madam. And now, she is even showing off her authority in front of me. Can I tolerate her? Not only did he slap her twice, but he also drove a wedge between her and the new Marchioness of Zhongguo. That lucky charm act of yours might fool an idiot like Lu Cheng, but thinking you can fool the new madam naive. Yun's revenge came that very night. Marquis of Zhongguo Lu Cheng came barging in furiously, while I was taking inventory of my newly acquired jewelry. "Lai, get your ass out here." He was like a wild boar charging into a pen, his bulging muscles quivering all over. In front of the Duke's manor servants, he pointed at my nose from afar. Who the hell do you think you are? Daring to slap my beloved concubine in public? I wouldn't even bear to lay a finger on her. Duanqing ran out from the study and blocked him. Old Lu, calm down, calm down. Calm down my ass. Lu Cheng shoved him aside and pointed at my nose. You country bumpkin. If I don't beat the shit out of you today, my name isn't Lu. Duanqing approached again. Old Lu, my wife is crude and shrewish. You know that. For the sake of brotherhood, let her off this time. Let her off. Lu Cheng's eyes bulged. Duanqing, are you even a fucking man? Your woman runs wild outside. You can't control her, so I'll do it for you. He raised his hand. Duanqing stood in front of me, forcing a smile. All right, I'll deal with her later. Lu Cheng stared at him, then suddenly laughed. That laugh was even more insulting than cursing. Duanqing! Oh, Duanqing, he said, slapping Duanqing's face. Back when we were chopping people together, you weren't like this. What happened? Got yourself made a duke, and now even the thing in your pants has been sealed away. Duanqing's face flushed the color of pig liver. Lu Cheng walked around him and came up to me, looking me up and down. This at your age wearing such gaudy jewelry, why don't you look in a mirror? Do you even deserve it? He turned back to Duanqing and said, If you ask me, you should just divorce this woman. I'll introduce you to some real noble ladies. Young ones, fresh ones, ones that won't embarrass you when you take them out. Duanqing kept his head down, saying nothing. What, can't bear to let her go? Lu Cheng sneered. A country bumpkin woman, and you're fucking treating her like treasure. All us old brothers who hasn't changed wives a few times. Only you're sticking with this hag. Aren't you embarrassed? Duanqing lifted his eyelids and glanced at me. That one glance he understood. It wasn't protection. He was annoyed that I was embarrassing him. All right. Lu Cheng turned back to me, pointing at my nose. 2 days matter. For old Lu's sake, I won't do it myself. Old Duan, you do it yourself. Duanqing stood to the side, his lips moving but making no sound. Lu Cheng's face was full of viciousness. Old Duan, you know my temper. I was both afraid and resentful. Afraid because Lu Cheng really was a mad dog. Whoever crossed him, he'd definitely bite back. Before, he still had a bit of humanity when dealing with his comrades as wives and concubines. Now, after reaching the peak of power, his true nature is fully exposed. What chills me even more is Duanqing, who actually slapped me in public to appease Lu Cheng's anger. Slap? My whole body flew out, my forehead hitting the pillar, seeing stars. You wasteful piece of trash. How dare you touch someone from the old Lu family? Today's little lesson should teach you a thing or two. I endured the dizziness and held onto the pillar to get up. He raised his hand again. Father, Chengji rushed in, dropping to his knees in front of Duanqing with a thud, clutching his leg tightly. Father, have mercy. Mother may be at fault. I stopped Chengji from continuing. Then, with half my face swollen, I knelt straight down before Lu Cheng. Lord Zhongguo, it is this concubine's fault. This concubine will never dare again. Please forgive this concubine for Linlin's sake. Mother. Chengji's eyes filled with immense grief, his face showing shock and deep humiliation. I shook my head slightly at him. Lu Cheng is a mad dog, and even more so a killer who doesn't bat an eye. A mad dog who survived the battlefield has no humanity left to speak of, even wearing human skin. Violence in his bones won't disappear with promotions and titles. He will only get worse. Linlin, that poor woman who was tortured to death by Lu Cheng before I left. She held my hand and said 4 words to me. Live well. The flesh on Lu Cheng's face twitched. The 2 words Linlin were like a thorn, piercing into his long rotten heart. Fine. Lu Cheng spat. For the sake of my nephew's admirable filial piety, I'll let your mother off this time. He looked at me word by word. Among us old brothers, most have changed wives or taken concubines. Only you're lucky enough to have met the soft-hearted old Duan. You fucking don't appreciate your blessings simply courting death. With that, he swaggered off with Yun Shi. Duanqing came over, reaching out to help me up. I dodged away. He froze, then flew into a rage from embarrassment. What are you dodging for? Wasn't today's mess caused by you anyway? Why did you have to provoke Yun Shi for no good reason? She is recognized as having a husband blessing fate. Lu Cheng is extremely superstitious. How could he not treasure her? I raised my head and looked at him. You're a duke, yet you let a mere marquis climb all over you. You beat your own legitimate wife just to appease him. Is that so glorious? I grew angrier as I spoke. He clearly doesn't take you seriously at all. He felt a bit guilty, but quickly became self-righteous again. Lu Cheng is just a mad dog. It is not like you don't know that. When I hit you, I still held back. If he hadn't calmed down, who knows what kind of trouble he would have stirred up. Enough, enough. He waved his hand irritably. Go back to your room and stay there. Stop embarrassing me. With that, he turned and left. His retreating figure showed not a trace of hesitation. Jade got up and helped me to my feet. Mother. I held his hand without saying a word, standing straight. I wiped the blood from the corner of my lips, gripping Jade's hand. I said word by word, Jade, I want Lu Cheng dead. I want him to be ruined and disgraced, to fall from heaven into hell. A trace of ferocity flashed across Jade's face as well. I've wanted Lu Cheng dead, not just for a day or two. The day Linlin drew her last breath, I held her skeletal hand. She first told me to live well, and finally said 2 words, take revenge. Today, that slap from Duanqing was the last straw. I know that wanting Lu Cheng dead won't be easy, but where there is a will, there is a way. I called Chengji and Chengping over, and we deliberated for several days and nights. Lu Cheng, that mad dog, having suddenly risen to prominence, all his problems came spilling out, taking lives carelessly, bullying men and dominating women, favoring concubines and destroying his wife, inside and outside the court. Criticisms piled up like mountains. The civil officials had long been dissatisfied. The emperor, mindful of these men's merit in helping him ascend the throne, didn't dare earn the infamy of discarding the bow once the birds are gone, so he could only raise his hand high and bring it down gently. But what if we add the lidian of the civil officials? The eldest son, Chengji, was responsible for finding people to contact Linlin's 2 children. They lived in constant fear under Lu Cheng's very nose, needing just one spark. The second son, Chengping, using his identity as a scholar from the academy, specifically picked places frequented by censors to loudly curse. Those censors criticize my father for being vulgar day and night, but when the Duke of Zhongguo really deserves to die for favoring his concubine over his wife and driving his first wife to death, they all go mute. The scholars joined in the commotion. The censors' faces turned green. I then entered the palace to request an audience with the empress. The empress had also suffered through hardships. She accompanied the emperor from horseback all the way to the dragon throne. Now, watching those favored consorts in the 3 palaces and 6 courts with their swollen bellies, her suffering was no less than ours, if not more. I knelt before her, crying like a child, crying about how Linlin died, crying about how those original wives and old companions were all gone now, those who died of illness, those sent back to their hometowns, those who disappeared without reason. The children they left behind should have been enjoying the hereditary privileges. Their parents brought them in golden luxury, but now they were neglected and trampled upon. The empress's eyes reddened. Back in the military camp, Linlin had helped her carry grain and supplies, and brew medicinal herbs. Those days, she hadn't forgotten. What do you want to do? She asked. I want Lu Cheng stripped of his title and credentials for the crime of favoring his concubine over his wife. The empress shook her head. This crime won't be enough to finish him off. His merit from following the dragon is solid and real. The emperor already feels guilty for suppressing his title, and the indulgence over these years has all been compensation. I raised my head. Your Majesty, have you ever thought about why those civil officials desperately send their daughters into military generals' families? She was startled. On the surface it is marrying off a daughter as a concubine. But what about beneath the surface? I lowered my voice. After Lu Cheng took that civil official's daughter as concubine, how many impeachment memorials against him decreased? Those who didn't take concubines get impeached every few days. Why did my family's Duanqing take Madame Zhou? Wasn't it because he was scared of being impeached? The empress's expression changed. What is the foundation of military generals? It is the merit of following the dragon. It is over 20 years of risking their lives. It is military command authority. The civil officials want to dig out this foundation and replace it with their own people, their own bloodlines. Once all these military generals become sons-in-law and concubine fathers to the civil officials, who will they listen to? Your Majesty, I stared into her eyes. What if one day, the hearts of all these military generals are no longer with His Majesty? Or to put it another way, when all these military generals are gone, and the newly appointed dukes, marquises, and earls are all the bloodlines of these civil officials. The Empress's expression changed drastically. After a long while she spoke. What do you want me to do? When there are enough impeachment memorials, please personally submit a petition, Your Majesty. Me? You are the Empress, the original wife who suffered through hardships with His Majesty. If you speak up for Lu Cheng's original wife, you're speaking up for all the suffering original wives in the world. When His Majesty hears this, he'll feel ashamed not only for Lu Cheng's sake, but for his own as well. She looked at me, a glint flashing in her eyes. I didn't continue further. Some things are best left unsaid. Those favored concubines in the inner palace should also have someone knock some sense into them. The Empress should finally let out this pent-up frustration. Once Lu Cheng falls, those ungrateful men will have to sleep with one eye open. Half a month later, the censors were provoked by Cheng Ping into submitting memorials. They impeached Lu Cheng for doting on his concubine and destroying his wife, forcing his first wife to death, allowing his servants to commit violence, and seizing people's land. Lu Cheng sent his household servants to corner those censors in an alley and beat them up. This beating blew the lid off everything. The iron-willed censors wrote memorials overnight, listing dozens of major crimes in great detail, criticizing Lu Cheng from the hair on his head to his heels. Immediately after, the sound of drums at Shunshin Prefecture shook the heavens. Lu Cheng's 2 sons knelt in the hall, accusing their biological father of conspiring with his favored concubine to force their legitimate mother to death. Witness testimony and physical evidence were all complete. Lu Cheng was ordered to stay home and reflect on his mistakes, but remained completely unconcerned. The law doesn't punish the masses. Half the men among his peers were taking concubines and marrying second wives, so why single him out for punishment? Besides, the emperor owed him a debt of gratitude. This title was rock solid. He didn't know that among the common people, things had already exploded. Scholars at the academies gathered daily at tea houses to curse him. Street urchins made up nursery rhymes about him. Storytellers turned Lady Lu's story into performance pieces, and when they reached emotional parts, the whole hall would be wiping away tears. The day Lu Cheng was impeached, Duan Qing locked himself in his study to write a memorial. Through the door I heard him cursing all afternoon. Damn it, those sour scholars just can't stand to see us military generals doing well. Back when we were fighting to win the empire, our heads were tucked in our belts, and they were hiding in the rear composing poems. Now, after enjoying a few days of peace, they're jealous? In the evening, he called Chengping in and scolded him thunderously. Your Uncle Lu even held you in his arms and let you ride on horseback when you were little. You ungrateful bastard, Chengping stiffened his neck. He came to our door and forced you to beat my mother. The humiliation of one's mother is an irreconcilable vendetta. Changji stood to the side, his gaze colder than icicles in the 12th lunar month. As a husband, father didn't stand up for my mother, but instead beat his lawful wife for an outsider. How noble is such conduct? Duan Qing choked. His face turned the color of pig liver, and after holding it in for a long while, he slapped the table. You don't understand shit. Lu Cheng is a mad dog who will repay the smallest grievance. If I hadn't beaten your mother then, how could I have satisfied his anger? He panted heavily, as if trying to convince himself, or perhaps his son. Chengping, you don't know how vile Lu Cheng is. Right now he is trapped in his residence, and can't get out. If he finds out you were the one coordinating things behind the scenes, do you think he'll let you off? I pushed open the door and went in. If he really does come to our door, we'll just say that you, the head of the family, ordered them to do it. Duan Qing pointed at me, his face red with anger. Foolish woman, stupid woman, how dare you set me up like this? I ignored him and slapped a manuscript on the table. So, to prevent Lu Cheng from seeking revenge afterward, I suggest the Duke immediately submit a memorial denouncing Lu Cheng for harboring resentment and having treasonous intentions all along. As for witnesses, the deathbed testament of the former Lady Lu, is that enough? Duan Qing lowered his head to look at the draft, his eyes nearly popping out. You're trying to completely finish off old Lu. I sneered coldly, my whole body filled with murderous intent. From the day he drove Linlin to her death, I've wanted his life. He came to my door to humiliate me over some cheap concubine. Every single moment I've been thinking about how to kill him. You, Duanqing pointed at me, looking at me like a stranger. When did you become so vindictive? I smiled faintly. Haven't you changed too? After being made duke, you've become arrogant, barking orders, surrounded by women on all sides. Now that I'm at least the duke's wife, naturally I should also be high and mighty, disown even my family, and make it so those who follow me prosper and those who oppose me perish. Duanqing opened his mouth. Duke, hurry up and write. I stared at him. Lu Cheng must die. First, to avenge him coming to humiliate your wife and children. Second, to cover up the fact that you're a coward. Shame and anger flashed across his face. When the time comes, you'll announce publicly, Lu Cheng went too far, forcing me to beat my own wife and children over some cheap concubine. What kind of scoundrel does such a thing? I only showed him so much tolerance out of respect for our past comradeship. Did he really think I was a sick cat? Third, I lowered my voice. Once Lu Cheng falls, someone will need to take over the military power in his hands. A light flashed fiercely in Duanqing's eyes. I handed him the brush, personally ground the ink, and watched as he wrote with crooked, uneven characters. When he wrote the final sentence, in consideration of Lu Cheng's great achievements for all eternity, please, Your Majesty, tolerate his flaws and prevent him from straying further down the wrong path. He paused his brush. The earlier part says he harbors resentment and complains about unfair rewards, but the latter part asks His Majesty to be lenient. Isn't this like taking off your pants to fart? Duke, just write it. I pressed down on his hand. His Majesty will make his own judgment. He looked at me with suspicion. Don't worry, I said. Not only must you write it, but you must let the whole world know why you wrote it. You're doing it to protect your wife, to seek justice for your legal wife. Scholars value this the most. Chengji chimed in from the side. Father, if word spreads that you protect your wife, the civil officials will think more highly of you. Chengping also nodded. Those classmates at the academy respect people who value loyalty and righteousness the most. Duanqing rolled his eyes, stamped his official seal half reluctantly, and had someone send it out. The very night the memorial was submitted, it spread throughout the palace and beyond. It is said that His Majesty personally handed it to several high ministers to read, sighing as they read. This crude man Duanqing is actually someone who values loyalty. Lu Cheng went too far, pushing even an honest man to desperation. Although Lu Cheng still wasn't punished, Duanqing's reputation did improve quite a bit. This day, Duanqing got dead drunk and put his arm around my shoulder, his tongue thick. Wife, that day, I was wrong. I helped him onto the bed and had someone remove his boots. He quickly started snoring, drool sliding down from the corner of his mouth, disgusting as hell. I stood before the bed, looking at this face I'd slept next to for 26 years. When Linlin was dying, she gripped my hand and said, "Revenge." She didn't say how I knew. Some knives need to be wielded by someone else's hand. Soon after, the Empress's memorial was submitted. It wasn't a simple impeachment but a blood-weeping petition, starting from carrying grain sacks in the military camp back then, describing how virtuous Lady Lu was, how she endured hardship, how she was tormented to death, describing how original wives throughout the realm suffered, how disheartening it was when military officers forgot their roots, what was hidden behind the marriages between civil and military officials. The final line, every word written in blood. This subject consort dares to beseech your Majesty to seek justice for all the suffering original wives under heaven. That night, the Emperor went to the Empress's palace. No one knew what they said. The next day at morning court, the imperial edict came down. Duke Protector Lu Cheng, for favoring his concubine and destroying his wife, driving his first wife to death, is stripped of his title and credentials, demoted to commoner status, never to be employed again. Lady Yun, beaten to death with rods. Other nobles who similarly favored concubines, destroyed their wives, and remarried noble ladies were all severely reprimanded. Not only were they fined 3 years' salary, they were also forced to observe a year of mourning for their first wives. When the news reached the inner quarters, I was facing the mirror, putting on that red gold kingfisher feather phoenix hairpin. Nanny was wiping tears beside me. "Madam, Lu Cheng has fallen." I hummed in acknowledgement and straightened the phoenix hairpin. "Madam, Why aren't you happy?" "Happy about what?" "Lu Cheng has fallen." "Momo," I said. "What do you think Duan Qing is thinking right now?" She froze. Outside the window, the swirling snow had, at some point, already blanketed the ground. Duan Qing has been unbelievably well behaved these days. The emperor's warnings to the nobles grew more intense by the day. He came to my room to check in every day, yet didn't even dare to step through the concubine's doors. I made him sleep on the Arhat bed in the outer room. He looked aggrieved. My wife never used to dislike me. I flipped through my book without even lifting my eyelids. Recently, I've invited several Jurin scholars to the estate to teach. Looking at those earnest students, reserved and refined, cultured and elegant, articulate in conversation, able to compose on the spot, I feel like I've grown younger. He froze, and then looking at you. Before I finished speaking, his face had already turned red. After a long pause, he stammered, "My wife can actually use so many idioms." I put down the book and lifted my chin. My father was at least a shukai, and our ancestors produced a jinshi. Just because I spent 26 years as a rough man's wife doesn't mean the scholarly heritage of a farming and reading family is severed. He stood there with his mouth open, as if seeing me for the first time. "All these years following you through military campaigns north and south, bearing and raising children, serving parents-in-law, stabilizing the home front, but I've never put down my books. Now that I'm the Duke's wife, I must keep up with the times even more." He suddenly grasped my hand. "Yui, I suddenly realize that the way you're dressed is no worse than those noble ladies from the previous dynasty." I pulled my hand back. "Clothes make the man. I can't bring shame to the Duke." He stared at me blankly, then suddenly called my personal name. "Yui?" I didn't respond. He grasped my hand again. 30% grievance, 50% probing. "I've noticed, Yue has been much colder to me lately." I pulled my hand back again. Those words should come from me. Since Lady Zhou entered the household, the Duke's treatment of me is no longer what it once was. He looked at me, his eyes somewhat dazed. You used to call me Delang. When did things become so distant?" I fell silent after a long while. I raised my eyes to look at him. People always change. I imitated the way those scholar officials look at commoners, glancing at him only from the corner of my eye. "As a dignified duke, your words and actions should also be restrained. From now on, don't make noise when eating. Don't make sounds when drinking tea. Don't pick your teeth in public." With each sentence, his presence diminished a notch. "When standing, stand properly." He immediately straightened his slightly hunched back, but soon grew tired and sat down. "When sitting, sit properly too." He quickly put his legs together and straightened his shoulders and back. After sitting for less than a cup of tea's time, he eagerly sidled over again. "Yui, I lowered my head to flip through my book, not looking at him. Outside the window, the sunlight was just right. Back then, he also used to eagerly scurry over like this, calling me Sister Yue, saying that once he made it big, he'd make me a lady of imperial rank. Now, the imperial rank is here, but that call of Yue from him, I never want to answer it again." Lu Cheng fell, the first founding minister to be stripped of his title and have his bonds destroyed. The day the news spread, Duan Qing's study was packed with people. 36 founding nobles, dukes, marquises, and earls filled the room to the brim. Duke Fugo Zhouhu was the first to speak. "Old Duan, the emperor is going to cast us aside now that we've served our purpose. What do we do?" Duan Qing rubbed his hands together, unable to answer. I walked in carrying a teacup. I set down the teacup, my gaze sweeping across their faces one by one. "His Majesty hasn't done anything yet, and you're all already panicking?" No one responded. I sneered coldly. "Back when you all scorned your wives of humble origins, did you ever think about how they felt?" Zhouhu slammed the table. "Old Duan, you're a grown man. Are you really going to let a mere woman point fingers at us?" Duan Qing's lips moved. He glanced at me, then shrank back. "I'm telling you, old Zhou," he forced out a sentence. "You drove your wife to death just to marry a noble lady, and now you won't let people talk about it." The entire room fell silent for a moment. Someone chimed in. "Never mind driving your first wife to death, at least the child was your own flesh and blood. When the new wife came in, you sent the kid back to your hometown. A half-grown boy, strong as an ox, died not long after returning home. They said it was because he couldn't adapt to the climate. Only a fool would believe that. Johu's eyes shifted evasively. That kid's been spoiled rotten by his mom. I can't control him. Old Joe, I interrupted him. Have you been experiencing lower back pain and fatigue lately? Feeling inadequate? He froze for a moment. How did you know? It is normal when you get old. I smiled. That is right. Birth, aging, illness, and death. No one can escape it. Fortunately, your new wife's belly is productive and gave you a legitimate son. When you die, that new wife of yours will be the youngest duke's wife in all of Great Yan. And that son of yours will be the youngest duke in all of Great Yan. Johu's face turned pale. The whole room gasped. These guys are more sensitive than anyone to the enemy's every move on the battlefield. But when it comes to these matters, they're blind and deaf. But after all, they crawled out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. With things spelled out this clearly, what is there not to understand? Old Joe, you've worked hard your whole life, only to end up making wedding clothes for others. This is the payback for casting aside the old for the new. Johu's face turned from pale to ashen, from ashen to pale. I picked up my teacup and turned to look at the others nearby. Marquis Liu, your second wife has been in the house for 3 years. Of the 2 children your first wife left behind, one drowned, one died falling from a horse. You say it was an accident? This has to be my favorite scene. She struts into a room full of cheating, midlife crisis having generals, and casually plants the seed that their shiny new trophy wives are poisoning them and eliminating their heirs. She handed out paranoia like party favors. By the time she took a sip of her tea, these men were sweating bullets, pure boss energy. Liu Wei shot to his feet. Have you also been experiencing lower back pain lately? I looked at him. Frequent nighttime urination, lack of energy. Sometimes you can't even draw your bow. He froze. If I remember correctly, your second wife is a young lady from a former Hanlon scholar's family. She has a distant relative who is a female physician in the medical field. She makes her rounds specifically in the inner quarters of various households. Liu Wei's face turned pale bit by bit. I looked at the next person, Marquis Zhao. Enough. Zhao Danyu waved his hands, his expression looking worse than if he were crying. Sister-in-law, please stop. I'll investigate as soon as I get back. I put down my teacup and got up to leave. At the doorway, I turned back for a glance. A whole room full of grand gentlemen in fine silk robes, every single one of them ashen-faced. On their faces, there was finally a trace of belated fear. Not much, but enough to keep them paranoid for a while. 36 men, I knew all of their original wives. Aside from the few who passed away early, the titled ladies still living could be counted on one hand. Shocking to the core, I returned to the main courtyard and had the nanny brew a bowl of tonic soup. Duan Qing followed me in, moving chairs one moment, supporting stools the next. I ignored him and drank the soup the maid brought over. What are you drinking? He leaned over. Tonic soup. You're only 38. What do you need tonics for? I put down the empty bowl and looked up at him. Back when I followed you on campaigns east and west, I developed quite a few ailments. I really should take good care of myself. Otherwise, if I die, some other woman will reap what I've sown, spend my money, and bully my children. Duan Qing gave an awkward laugh. Madam worries too much. I, Duan Qing, am not the kind of person who would abandon his wife who shared his hardships. Even if I die, I stared at him. I absolutely won't let those bastards step on my corpse to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I will definitely live to 99 and outlive you ungrateful people. The smile on his face could no longer hold. Madam, I have not favored concubines over my wife. Under my gaze. His voice grew smaller and smaller, his eyes beginning to evade. Suddenly he slapped himself hard across the face. It is my fault. I'm not human. I'll go drive the Joe woman and the others out of the manor right away. Come back. I called him back, stood up, and personally straightened his collar. Am I the kind of person who is jealous and intolerant? You've worked hard all your life. What is wrong with enjoying a few women? That is their good fortune too. He froze. But one thing, I gripped his collar and tightened it slightly. The household authority, family assets, and the Duke's title must be left to my children. That is only natural. I'm not a fool like old Joe, working hard all my life, only to end up making wedding clothes for others. I released my hand and sat back down. When a second wife enters the house, she will inevitably have ambitions. The Duke's title is a juicy piece of meat. Who wouldn't want a bite? She will eliminate rivals, deal with the first wife's children, and then take their place. Weren't they all like this? Duan Qing's Adam's apple rolled. Just tell me, Duke, are you afraid or not? He nodded heavily, a trace of coldness flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, he embraced me tightly. Madam is still the best. You saw right through those women's tricks in one glance. Disgusted, I shoved him away. He suddenly asked, Has Jo been behaving herself around you lately? I gave an ambiguous smile. She is the legitimate daughter of the former Marquise's household. After falling on hard times, she can only be a concubine to a crude oaf like you who barely knows a few characters. Do you really think she is truly resigned to it? The flesh on his face twitched. She should be. Not that bad, right? She has been pretty well behaved lately. I smiled and said nothing more. A blade hangs over the character for lust. When our ancestors created this character, they probably foresaw it all. After Lu Cheng was demoted to commoner status, I knew he would come. I just didn't expect him to come this quickly. The sound of swords hacking at the mansion gates could be heard even through 3 courtyards. Duan Qing rushed out from the study, his face deathly pale. Look at what you've done now. Old Lu is at our door with a blade. I set down my teacup. How many men did he bring? About 100 or so, all his former personal guards. That is enough. I stood up and walked out. Duan Qing grabbed me. Where are you going? To muster troops. Are you insane? He stared wide-eyed. That is Lu Cheng. You dare kill him in the street. I shook off his hand and looked back at him. If you don't kill the snake, it'll come back to haunt you. I was just looking for him and now he has delivered himself to my doorstep. But you can't do it in front of everyone. So, I interrupted him. All of this was done by me alone. It has nothing to do with the Duke. He froze. From now on, you pretend to be sick. I'll manage the Duke's estate, and you know nothing about what is happening outside. If anyone asks, push everything onto me. He opened his mouth. Go quickly. I straightened his collar for him, smiling gently. Let Lady Jo serve you well. Better act convincingly. Don't let anyone find out. He stared at me for a long while, then suddenly breathed a sigh of relief as if a weight had been lifted. Then you, be careful. Watching his back as he scurried off to the rear courtyard, I smiled. This man, his whole life is like this. When faced with anything other than warfare, especially interpersonal troubles, he loves to play the coward and hide behind me. In the past I was frustrated with his lack of backbone. Now I only feel fortunate without him getting in the way. The 500 estate soldiers moved as smoothly as my own arms. The moment the main gate swung open, Lu Cheng was still hacking at the door with his blade. Duan Qing, get the hell out here, you ungrateful bastard. His cursing came to an abrupt halt, because he saw me, saw the mass of armored estate soldiers behind me. Commoner Lu Cheng armed siege of the Duke's estate, insubordination against superiors, by law, punishable by death. I raised my hand and gave the order, sever one of his arms, reward of 1,000 taels of silver. With such a hefty reward, those killers' eyes turned red. Lu Cheng's 100 or so personal guards all fell in pools of blood within half a cup of tea's time. Only he remained, like a mad dog covered in blood and swinging his blade to hold on. Fighting while retreating, retreating while cursing. Duan Qing, you cowardly turtle. I saved your life back then, and you send a woman out to kill me? No one paid him any mind. The garrison soldiers only stared at his arm. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, he was half kneeling on the ground, half his shoulder hacked off, blood dyeing the bluestone slabs pitch black. I walked up to him. He raised his head, staring at me with eyes full of venomous hatred. Where is Duan Qing? He has got the guts to kill me but not the guts to come out. Lu Cheng. I looked down at him from above. The day you drove Linlin to her death, did you ever think this day would come? His pupils contracted sharply. It is you, you fucking bitch. Linlin broke ties with her family for you, followed you through mountains of blades and seas of fire. You achieved success and fame, yet she didn't enjoy a bit of fortune tortured to death by you. At her funeral, I asked you to treat the 2 children. Well, what was your answer?" He gritted his teeth, cursing filth from his mouth. I looked down from above. "Wasn't the Yun clan supposed to bring you prosperity? How come it didn't work out?" A trace of regret flashed through his eyes, then was immediately drowned by venomous hatred. When the people from the 5 cities' military commission arrived, the entire street was full of corpses. The leader saw Lu Cheng looking like a blood-soaked figure and got a fright. But they were particularly courteous to me, nowadays, who in the capital doesn't know that it is practically the mistress running the Duke of Rong's household. Without another word, they carried Lu Cheng away. His Majesty is indeed benevolent. Although Lu Cheng was stripped of his title, he was after all an old retainer from the days before the throne. His Majesty pardoned him and had the imperial physicians treat him. Not in a hurry. Upon returning to the estate, I first had someone go to the Imperial Medical Bureau with a formal request for the best internal medicine specialist to come treat Duan Qing. Then, carrying a bowl of medicine, I entered the bedroom. Lady Zhou was keeping watch by the bed. Seeing me arrive, she obediently withdrew. I handed the medicine to Duan Qing. "It is for calming the nerves. Drink it and lie down properly. The imperial physician will be here soon, don't blow our cover." He drank it without another word. For over 20 years I've been the one making all the decisions, big and small. In this household he'd long gotten used to it. As the medicine took effect, he quickly fell asleep. When the imperial physician arrived, Duan Qing was lying in bed, his face pale with a greenish tinge, breath faint and feeble. I sat by the bed wiping away tears. It is all triggered by old injuries. In the early years following His Majesty to conquer the realm, he braved mountains of blades and seas of fire, always relying on his youth to tough it out. This morning he could still get up, but when that brute Lu Cheng came barging in, the Duke, being sentimental by nature, got both anxious and angry, and collapsed right on the spot. The imperial physician took his pulse, nodded, and wrote a prescription. I rewarded him generously and personally escorted him out. Then I changed my clothes and entered the palace to plead guilty. Kneeling before the imperial presence, I kowtowed with resounding thuds. Lu Cheng led people to storm the Duke's manor, causing the Duke's old illness to flare up and collapse on the spot. I was panicked and helpless, and in a moment of fury ordered that scoundrel killed. "I beg your Majesty, considering how the Duke has risked life and limb for you, to punish only me alone." The Emperor said nothing. I raised my head, my face covered in tears. That bastard went too far. Back then, for the sake of some lowly concubine, he came barging to our door and forced the Duke to divorce me. I endured it, but he shouldn't have come killing his way to our door when the Duke was gravely ill. Are we faithful wives who shared hardship only fit to suffer alongside our husbands, but not to enjoy prosperity with them? What can be tolerated? What cannot be tolerated? The Emperor was moved. He personally helped me up and sighed. "Old Duan's achievements today are inseparable from your contributions as a virtuous wife. Lu Cheng has always been arrogant. This disaster befalling him is his own doing." When leaving the palace, I carried imperial gifts of tonics in my arms, followed by an imperial physician assigned by the Emperor. The news spread throughout the capital that very day. Visitors came in an endless stream to inquire after the Duke's health. Those founding heroes who used to give me a nod at most, now respectfully called me sister-in-law, or younger sister-in-law, one after another, greeting me upon entering and expressing thanks before leaving. They had also gone to visit Lu Cheng, and mentioned Lu Cheng's miserable condition to me in passing. His entire arm is gone, and his body is covered with countless wounds big and small. Although the imperial physicians have treated him, the situation still isn't good. I reckon he doesn't have much time left. The second wife he remarried has long since left a divorce letter and gone back to her parents' home with her dowry. All his trusted aides have left too, leaving only 2 children. It is truly pitiful. While saying this, they stole glances at me. I let out a cheerful cold laugh. Serves him right. This is what he gets for forcing old Duan to humiliate me back then. These people immediately fell silent, then started going on about how Lu Cheng brought it upon himself and wasn't worthy of sympathy. I stood in the corridor, watching people come and go, and smiled. They say I'm a woman who is every bit as good as any man. They say I'm fiercely protective of my husband, valuing loyalty and righteousness. They say Lu Cheng deserves it, that he brought it upon himself. Not a single person mentions how envious they all looked when Lu Cheng married his new wife. Well, of course, who would remember that? In the past, they only remembered the first wife's vulgarity and her repulsive aging appearance. But they don't know that when you push a first wife too far, she'll also take lives. Duan Qing's illness came on strangely. The imperial physicians were changed wave after wave. Medicine was poured down bowl after bowl. Yet he grew worse by the day. The most anxious wasn't that group of sworn brothers of his, nor was it the emperor on the dragon throne, and it certainly wasn't me, it was Lady Zhou. She practically never left his bedside, personally brewing medicine, personally feeding him medicine. Her eyes cried red and swollen, her whole person having lost a circle of weight. Every time I come in or out, I just glance at her with the corner of my eye. The coldness in that gaze is enough to make her tremble for a long while. She has collapsed crying at Duan Qing's bedside more than once. Duke, this concubine is afraid. The way Madame looks at me, it is like she wants to kill someone. Duan Qing lies in bed, his body heavy, but his mind still intact. Yui, this illness of mine, could it be before he can finish? I silently place a ledger by his pillow. The sweetheart the Duke treasures on the tip of his heart, in the half-year since entering the house. The things she has taken from the storeroom are all in here. He opens the first page, and his expression immediately changes. Gold ornaments, jade pieces, antiques from the previous dynasty, imperial tribute silk, 141 items, 8 volumes can't even contain them all. I hand him the second book. This is the silver she withdrew from the accounting office. At first 10 or 20 taels, then 100 taels, 1,000 taels. In half a year 37,000 taels. I lean down and say soft, 37,000 taels is enough to maintain a private army. Duan Qing's hands begin to shake. The things Joshi has moved out average 2 items per day, truly worthy of being the carefully cultivated legitimate daughter of a marquis household from the previous dynasty. Compared to her, Yun Shi is nothing. He suddenly sits up and shouts hoarsely, "Simone, bring that bitch here." When Joshi enters, there is no panic on her face. She knelt on the ground, suddenly covering her mouth, dry heaving. I laughed. "Aunt Zhou, are you with child?" She raised her eyes, shy and timid. "Madam has good eyes. This concubine has been vomiting these past 2 days. The nanny said it might be good news. I wanted to report to Madam, but was afraid of angering Madam, so I could only endure it." Before she finished speaking, a teacup was violently smashed on her forehead. Duan Qing sprang up from the bed, like an enraged caged beast. "Beat her to death with clubs for me." Joshi covered her bleeding forehead, looking at him in disbelief. Until her death she never understood why the words good news brought not affection, but fatal disaster. She didn't understand. Those sisters of hers from noble families of the previous dynasty didn't understand either. What do these men who crawled out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood hate most? Not stealing money, but stealing family. They moved things from their husband's family to their maiden family, thinking it was ordinary household scheming. But they didn't know that in these men's eyes, this was the same as enemy spies emptying grain supplies and cutting off retreat routes. After Joshi died, Duan Qing sent soldiers to raid the Zhou family, only recovered a small portion of the things. When the guard captain Chen Suiyan returned to report, his face was livid. Following the Duke through life and death for 20 years, we've always been the ones raiding other people's homes. Never thought a woman would raid us clean. After hearing this, Duan Qing's last breath, sustained by rage, completely gave out. He fell straight down, stiff as a board, when he woke up again. He could no longer speak. I sat by the bed, looking at him. His sworn brother Zhou Hu went mad. The cause of death for his first wife and legitimate son was revealed. It was indeed the new wife's doing. My crude instigation back then was just because I couldn't stand seeing him so comfortable, so I deliberately made it up. But Zhou Hu believed it, and after going back, he had people around the new wife arrested and tortured. Ordinary people under torture would confess without hesitation, even if you asked them whether they shot down the stars in the sky. Then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The new wife really had poisoned him, just in light doses. The young child born to the new wife knelt on the ground, begging and crying. This man who could hold the pass alone on the battlefield burst into wailing tears on the spot. Liu Wei wasn't doing any better. His first wife was frail. His legitimate son was ruined in upbringing. The new wife hadn't poisoned anyone. but there was solid proof she'd been moving the Marquis Manor's assets to her natal family. His younger son hugged his leg calling daddy. He locked himself in his study for 3 days, and when he came out, half his hair had turned white. I said to Duanqing, Zhou Hu and Liu Wei's first wives suffered all kinds of hardships following their men back then, only to end up making wedding clothes for others. How pitiful their children, the sick ones sick, the dead ones dead, the ones raised crooked all crooked. Duanqing's cloudy eyeballs moved slightly. Linlin too, if her spirit is in heaven, who knows how much regret she must feel. His lips trembled, as if he wanted to say something. Why was the Lu Cheng so easily stripped of his title? The favored concubine destroying the wife was just an excuse. What really sealed his fate was his marriage alliance with the previous dynasty. I looked at him. The emperor rebelled because he was driven to desperation by those scholar officials. After finally trampling them down, you lot rushed to form marriage alliances with them. How could the emperor not be wary? Fear and relief flashed across his face. Although the Zhou family wasn't a cancer of the previous dynasty, just ordinary nobility implicated by association, I paused. But do you know how my parents died? His eyes flew wide open. Then his body began to tremble violently, he remembered. The Zhou family's father, the former Dingxi Marquis of the previous dynasty, had back then bullied men and violated women, driving his father-in-law's entire family to death. And he had brought his wife's mortal enemy's daughter into the household, even forcing his wife to treat her well. He looked at me, tears rolling down in big drops. His lips moved desperately, but only produced gasping sounds. That hand reached out tremblingly, trying to grasp something. I didn't take it, I just stood up and looked down at him. Duke, go in peace. Your mission is complete. I've suffered alongside you for most of my life. It is time I enjoyed some peace and happiness. After you're gone, with no man controlling me from above, no husband's authority pressing down on me, no one will call me an old hag anymore, and no one will ever despise me again. Just thinking about such days feels wonderful. He stared wide-eyed, his murky pupils filled with disbelief. I've calculated everything. The emperor will treat us orphans and widows well because of your untimely death. After all, a dead meritorious subject can put the emperor's mind more at ease than a living one. He opened his mouth, trying to say something with sounds, I continued. Ever since you were granted your title, I've been thinking of a way to let you live a decent life until old age. I've been thinking of you wholeheartedly, yet you've been breaking my heart at every turn. Complex emotions, guilt, and regret flashed across his face, and tears slid from his eyes once again. I let out a light sigh and said cheerfully, but this is good too. Die early. Stay dignified early. I still have to thank you. I can finally enjoy my peaceful blessings without worry. I'm only 39. If I take a fancy to some young gentleman, I can summon him into the manor too. His body convulsed violently. Forgot to tell you, what you drank back then wasn't a sterilization potion, but cinnabar. The amount of cinnabar wasn't large. It wouldn't take his life. What would really take his life was that later bowl of medicinal soup with an increased dose. His eyes suddenly widened in shock, his face flashing with disbelief, regret, and venomous hatred. I looked at him, a trace of grief floating at the corners of my lips. The light in his eyes extinguished inch by inch. He only closed his eyes painfully, 2 lines of tears silently sliding from the corners of his eyes. After a long while, he heavily exhaled a breath of stale air. He slowly closed his eyes. I stood for a while, then turned and walked out. Walking to the door, I turned back for one more look. His expression was peaceful. It seemed he had come to terms with it, just like when he said he wanted to take a concubine. I wore the same expression. Duanqing's funeral was held with exceptional grandeur. I left all the funeral arrangements to our 2 sons. The emperor also gave Duanqing great face, issuing an edict at the funeral to confer the title of new Duke of Rongguo upon Chengge. The second son, Chengping, could still participate in the upcoming special imperial examination. The emperor's rewards to the Duan family were exceptionally generous. Everyone was saying, the emperor truly favored Duanqing with great grace. Only I knew that as a founding minister who survived intact and whole, the best way to preserve one's final dignity before the emperor was to die early. I racked my brains to preserve his body, but he insisted on colluding with those people. Then I could only grant him his dignity once and for all. I didn't go to the mourning hall. but guests coming to see me were constantly streaming in. They were all people I'd befriended over the years. Original wives, second wives, and those who, like me, had endured. When I appeared at the morning hall, all the guests turned to look at me in unison. In their eyes were respect, probing, and a hint of unconcealed awe. I said to the guests, "Everyone now that old Duan is gone, I'm just a widowed woman. It won't be convenient for me to meet with your families anymore." Then I shifted tone, looking toward the wives beside these people. "However, the gates of the Duke of Rongguo's residence are always open for you ladies." No one spoke, but I knew they understood. In the past, when we gathered together, all we could do was cry. Cry about men changing their hearts, cry about our bitter fates, cry about the children being pitiful. From now on, when we gather together, we can do something else. For example, make those ungrateful bastards unable to sleep at night. For example, let those high-born nobles who always like to steal the fruits of others' labor know where the wife of humble origins keeps her knife. Outside the window, it had already gotten dark. I was the first to walk out of the morning hall. I was going to enjoy my wonderful widow life. Oh, my gorgeous friends. Let's take a deep breath, because this story gave me chills. How many times do we see incredible, hardworking women sacrifice their youth, their health, and their sanity to help a man build his empire, only for him to turn around and say she is too old, or too embarrassing to sit beside him on the throne? It is a tale as old as time, but our heroine said, "Not today, honey." She didn't beg, didn't try to compete with an 5-year-old. She recognized that her husband was a lost cause and immediately pivoted her strategy. She secured her son's inheritances, avenged her best friend, terrified every cheating man in the capital, and cleared her own path to freedom. And that ending? Standing at his funeral, making eye contact with all the other long-suffering wives, silently letting them know that the era of crying is over, and the era of striking back has begun. Iconic. She walked out of that mourning hall ready to enjoy her title, her wealth, and maybe even a few handsome young gentlemen of her own. Now, I need to hear from you down in the comments. The poison, was her giving him the cinnabar potion justified after he slapped her, or did she go too far? The widow era, if you were in her shoes with all that duke's money, what is the first thing you're doing? The friend, how satisfying was it when she finally took down Lu Cheng for what he did to her bestie Linlin? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our tea times. Remember, ladies, never let a man make you feel like an old coat. You are designer vintage. Love you all. See you next time.